Coming, everybody. I want to begin with my thank yous for my wife, Valerie Wedge, formatting this PowerPoint. If you'd seen the primitive version that I put together, you would have been disappointed. I also want to thank my daughter, Anna, who is my collaborator on my articles and 2 books that we've done. She's the photographer, and all the photos in this PowerPoint are from her. I'd like to thank Kim Martindale for the kind invitation to do 2 presentations at Whitehawk this year. And I'd like to thank our tech genius in the back for, look at this, we're right on time, there's the PowerPoint, and wow, that's half the battle, just having it ready to roll. And I do have contact information there. If any of you have questions or comments or want to heckle me later, that would be fine. I'm going to talk about today the history of Hopi Katsina carving in a brief way, and in the time we have. I just want to point out, sometimes people refer to me as a Katsina expert. That's incorrect. I'm not an expert. I'm a Pahana, I'm a white guy who has been to the Hopi reservation many times. But it's impossible for a Pahana to be an expert on Katsina. Only Hopi are experts. I am a specialist, and I have written a lot of articles and 2 books on the topic, but I have to keep in mind what I know and what I don't know. And I do have many friends on the Hopi reservation and others who have guided me and supported my knowledge over, well, since I started going out in the late 1980s. And one other comment, the artist I'll be talking about, that was a basic way I collected information. For those that are deceased, I interviewed next of kin, usually children, and wrote down what they had to say. And then I don't use tapes. I think it's off-putting. I wrote them down by hand. And then I would type them up when I got back to home and send them a draft. So that they had I said, you're totally in control of what I say about you and your father, so it should be your control. And then for the current artists for the last 30, 40 years, I interviewed them in person, same way, wrote down what they said, sent them what I remembered them saying, and requested their edits. Only one person in this entire process ever decided that she didn't want to be part of a book. And it had to do with some sensitivity regarding family issues, not anything to do with me being insensitive or unkind. So, carvings have been collected really since the mid-19th century. You can find a few in museums from the 1850s or whatever, but they're really only commonly collected since the 1880s. And early on, Katsina were made exclusively for internal tribal use. But as the Pahanas, the researchers, the anthropologists, and so on started coming out to the Hopi reservation because they found it to be a fascinating place, well, they started to buy them, and they often ended up in museums or personal collections. And back then, early on, none of them were signed. They were made for internal purposes only. The purpose of these spirit beings in wood is they're given to children as prayers for good health and long life. And every Hopi female gets a flat doll at birth or shortly after birth, and then they continue to get Katsinam until they become mature young adults, adolescents, and then other presents emerge. Males only get 1 Katsina shortly after birth, and after that they receive from the Katsina at ceremonies and things like that, things like bows and rattles and the like. Now the first form of Hopi Katsinam are Putskatihu. By the way, if anyone's Hopi in this audience, I know my pronunciation is pathetic, and I'm just faking it. So the Putskatihus, look how simple they are. They're just flat boards of wood. And they're flat boards of wood, and you'll notice that there's a common figure here. this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. That's Hahai-Wuti. She's sometimes referred to as the grandmother Katsina and the personification of everything that is feminine. And she's the most common Katsina given to infants shortly after birth. And I got this collection from John Malloy several years ago, and they're just a wonderful example of 19th century flat dolls, but cradle Katsina. And I learned from Hopi what's with the three lines. And as you can see here, Hopi people gave me different explanations. One said they're the bloodlines and wish for long life. Clark Trinakongva, the former vice chairman of the Hopi tribe, a renowned Katsina carver, he told me that the middle red bar represents the mother, and the ones on the left and right represent her children. And then a third person said the three red stripes represent the three previous worlds, because the Hopi believe that we currently live in the fourth world. And by the way, with enough sinning and contamination and environmental degradation, some Hopi say we're going to lose the fourth world and we may up in the fifth if we're lucky. So contamination of this world is part of the Hopi worldview and a concern of theirs. So here's two very early examples. The one on the left is particularly interesting. Notice how it's got three stripes. And notice it also has female genitals. Now that is an early one published in my book from the Heard Museum. And what's interesting about it is it's full figured, but it has the three stripes. What does that mean? It means it's a transitional figure. It's moving from being a cradle doll with the three stripes, but now we've got a full figure. Why does it have genitals? Because early on, the Hopi put male and female genitals on their carvings. But then the Christian missionaries came out and objected to the open sexual characteristics, so then the Hopi became more muted as to genital on Katsina dolls. This one is from 1880. It's one of my favorite dolls I've ever had. It's a Hisak Katsina. And Hisak Katsina means an ancient one. It means one who no longer appears. And the Hopi religion is very vital. People have written that there are over 400 different Katsina figures, 400 or more. But new ones emerge and old ones disappear. And that's what this one is. This is a Hisak. Nobody can identify what that is. And in fact, I have a letter from Barton Wright, renowned scholar, who said he decided it was a Hisak because the features were so mixed. So it's a reference in the hand of Hopi history from a long time ago, about 1880. Now these are Katsina from the 18th century, moving to 1900 or so. And note the very simple characteristics. And I'll talk more about the one on the far left tomorrow because it's an interesting historical example, because it has no feet. Why does it have no feet? Well, I'll tell you tomorrow if you can. And this one is a Koplo Katsina. It's interesting because it has a garment and it has attached arms. That was quite unusual among most Hopi Katsinam, but you saw some of them about 1890, or between 1890 and 1900, because there were no rules back then. People carved whatever they wanted to. But then it got standardized, and standardized into the stomach ache or the belly ache position. There's a Hopi word for it, but I can't pronounce it. And all three of those are in the stomach ache position, and two of them are here. And they're both from just about 1910, 1920, we estimate. Now I haven't carbon dated any of these things, but there are legitimate estimates from the publications, and also museum acquisition dates help us identify carvings from particular time periods. Notice how there aren't any accoutrements, no rattles, no bows, nothing in the hands, and they're just simple linear forms. So the first person to become known as a Hopi Katsina carver by name is one of my favorite carvers, perhaps my favorite carver, Wilson Tawaquapua. And here's a picture of him, 2 pictures of him. And what was interesting about him was he lived from 1873 to 1960, but he never did an accurate representation of a Katsina dollar. He distorted them on purpose. And the reason for that was he was the Kikmongwi, the village chief of the ancient village of Arayavi. And that involved very important religious roles and functions. And because of that, he felt that he should not create accurate representations of Katsinam. Therefore, he distorted them all. And Barton Wright told me that because I became friends with that famous scholar. And he told me that Tawaquapua never made an accurate one. But that's a white guy, so I wanted to see if I could get that confirmed by somebody, Hopi. And I was able to track down Stanley Bonimtua, who was his adopted son. And I asked Stanley the question, didn't want to lead the witness. I said to him, what were his favorite Katsinam to carve? And he said, oh, he didn't carve them the right way. He distorted them intentionally for religious reasons. So the good news was I got confirmation from a Hopi relative that he made them up or mixed them up. And that's how I describe, well, I'll get to that in a minute. Here's 2 pictures of Tawaquapua, and the one is on the right, on the left. No, you're right, sorry. Is by Paul Coase, a famous French scholar, and this was taken in 1935. And Tawaquapua clearly didn't like to wear shirts very much. And this one is later. That was published in the 1948 issue of Arizona Highways. What I find particularly fascinating about these 2 photos is, look all the inventory. This guy had a lot of dolls on hand, and most of the Katsina carvers I know these days, you go to their homes, they got 1 or 2. Or maybe they have none and they'll say, I'll make you one by tomorrow. So it's fascinating that he had so much inventory. And he used to give tours of the old village of Arrivi, which would conclude at his home. And then he would sell a Katsina dollar to the scholars or the tourists or whatever. Anyway, there he is. And I had mentioned he either mixed them up or made them up. Mixed them up meant he took features from a regular Katsina but compromised them, changed them. For example, on the left in this picture, it looks like a wolf, but he added all these crazy polka dots and dashes, and he was comical. Well, how many of you have seen a cross-eyed wolf? I mean, not a typical feature. And the one he made that up. He joking around. The one in the middle is a cicada, which he's modified, and the one on the right, a huli. By the way, Tawaquapua got screwed by the U.S. government. He was the head of the friendly or accommodator group of the Hopi in the village of Arayavi, and there was another group called resistors. And the resistors did not like assimilation with Anglos. They didn't want Anglo tools. They didn't want Anglo medicine. They thought it was compromising their way of life, which should have been kept pure. So he was the head of the friendly portion. And there was a pushing match in 1906 in which the hostiles, the resistors, lost the pushing match. They got pushed over the line. And they went and established another village, Haute-Villa in Bakavi, which exists to this day. But then, here he is, the accommodator, the friendly, the one working with the U.S. government. And the U.S. government gathers him up, he and 30 other Hopi, including his family, and transport him to the Sherman Indian School in Riverside, California, where he stays for 2 or 3 years. So here he is, works with the government, and gets captured and taken to that government in California. And there's a guy named Matthew Gilbert, a Hopi scholar, Zakiesta was his last name. He's written about how Tawaquaptua in California turned the power. And what they tried to do in those Indian schools is forbid you to speak your Hopi language, your native language, cut off your hair, and give you a new Anglo name. Tawaquaptua subtly opposed all that. He learned English very quickly, and he continued doing eagle dances with some of the youth in his 30-number group. And he even started to do educational programs about the Hopi land in California when he made friends with a school superintendent out in California. Anyway, so he got screwed by the US government, and when he came back 3 years later, he wasn't quite so friendly to them because he felt that he had been totally mistreated and betrayed. It's not that he fought militarily or anything like that, but he was no longer a great ally. So those are the mixed up examples, and these are made up. There's no casino that really looks like this. One of them has full corn ears on the side of his head, along with amoeba-like designs on his cheeks. This one has wonderful scallops on the side of his head, and then koshari or clown-like horns. And this one's made up too. So this particular one is a mixed up version of an owl. These ears look like a great horned owl. But then this paint on here, I call it barbed wire motif. He made that up. Hopi don't do that in their casino. There's no design of Hopi casino with that crisscross railroad tie kind of thing. So, what a fascinating individual, and what a privilege it was for me to meet his adopted son. This is arguably the best Tawaquaptua doll ever created. That's published in my book from the Herd Museum. It's 33 inches tall, and it's a mixed up version. He's got a snake in his mouth. Oh, it must be a snake priest. Well, yeah, except he's got woolly feathers on the side of his head. And the body paint is not what a snake priest has. So it's totally mixed up, and it's incredibly detailed. And I believe it to be the biggest one he ever made at 33 inches. It's exceptional. Whenever I go to the Herd, I try to track it down because I feel like it's an inspirational old friend. A couple more by Tawaquaptua. That's a matched pair on the left that are only about this big, and I just showed you the one on the right. Okay, so the next guy I want to talk about, the next person to become influential and identified by name, was Otto Pentua. And Otto Pentua was from Kakatsmavi. I got to know his son, Dick Pentua, and he provided me lots of information about his father. And with Pentua, as you're about to see, the dolls became much more elaborate. He added moccasins and rattles and bows and kilts and sashes. Some of his dolls were minimalist carving, other of them were very detailed and elaborate. And he often used bent wood that other people would throw away. And his hands were no longer tummy ache position. His hands were often like this, but he had a million variations. And he used any furs he could find, and he'd sell them to Anglo tourists. What kind of a fur is that? Oh, that's a rabbit. Except it may have been a mole, mice, dog, cat, coyote, fox, bear, and buffalo. So, it's okay to pull the wool over the eyes. You know, my pelt isn't going to kill you, hopefully. Anyway, here's 3 by Otto. That's a wolf on the right, as is this. And this wolf, he put a lot of time on this. This is a staff he's holding to represent when he appears ceremonially as his front legs. He's looking up to the heavens. Why? Because the Hopi casino religion is mostly about obtaining rain. where they only get 9 to 12 inches a year. So he's looking up, is there gonna rain or not? That's my guess. That's one of the bigger ones I've had. These are classics. I got the one on the on your right. That's a flute. You see, he's got a flute in his hand, and that one had buffalo hide on the head. I got that from John Hill. And then this guy over here, this rather scary guy. He's a bear kitsina, but he has, he's a buffalo kitsina, but he has a bear skin on top of it. So amazing use of different furs. We've already talked about this friend here. Pentua also made miniatures about this size. He made a lot of them. Seemed to do them in the 50s. He died in 63. And some people dispute whether those are really autos. Others say they are. We'll probably never know. I call them autos, but explain that it could be ambiguous. So the next person I'm going to talk about is Jimmy Kawinwaitua. And he was the first carver to sign his dolls. And he was a fascinating guy. He got hired at the Museum of Northern Arizona in 1931 as a handyman. But he quickly became their premier lecturer. And he would speak about Hopi culture. He would sing Hopi songs. He was just an extremely charismatic individual. He was only 5 feet tall and barrel-chested, I'm told, but extremely charismatic. And the wife of Harold Colton, the director of the M&A back in the 30s, when Jimmy started his job, she recommended, why don't you start signing your dolls? Because what do Anglo artists do? They want attribution, right? So she recommended Jimmy do it, and he did. But my wife and I went through the M&A collection one time, all 120 of the M&A Jimmy K. They had more Jimmy K's than anybody else because Jimmy worked there for 32 years. And we found that only about 40% of the dolls in the M&A collection were signed. This is Jimmy and Agnes, and Agnes was the main source of my information. When I was writing my first piece on Jimmy, I went to her house in Shamopavi, and she said something very cute to me. She said, well, my father was opposed to my marrying Jimmy. It was his second marriage. He was much older than I was. But then she got this grin on her face, and she said, but he was strong. I think I got the drift of what she was telling me about her husband, who by then had passed. Anyway, wonderful picture of those two. And you see they're in Flagstone, Arizona, which is a non-existent city as far as I know. Hey, I have a client in Utah who really likes Jimmy K dolls, and this is half of his collection. Bob Orman. These are the largest Jimmy K's that have ever been identified. Those two are published in my 2019 book. They're in the 30-inch range, and they're at the M&A. And it's fun to see those babies because they're so dramatic. What's distinctive about Jimmy? Straight up forms, no bending like Auto Pentua, no crazy postures, vibrant colors, water-based, arms often extended to the body, beginning the early action trend, accurate representations of the kitsinen. He wasn't a Tawaquapta, he was accurately rendering them. And you could pick his dolls out whether they're signed or not. Now this one isn't signed, but it's clearly his. It's a Hope Day, probably from 1940s. It's got a bow, it had a round, which broke off, and those are accoutrements. So he was starting to provide more. Are you going to stand up or not? The next person is one of my favorite carvers, but I guess all of these guys are my favorite carvers. James Cootshangi. His name was shortened to Jimmy Coots, and you see when he lived. And he was short corn plant, born in Hautevilla. And he was a political advocate. He advocated for Hopi traditional values, and he wrote a newsletter, Techqua Ikachi, Land and Life. He wrote it for 15 years. He published it. He met with, get this, he met with the United Nations 4 times in advocacy for the protection of Hopi tribal rights and for their rights and control over their minerals, such as coal and oil. And he was reasonably successful. One of the members of the UN delegation stayed at his house once in Hope Villa. And how did I get this information? I got it from Dennis Coots, his son, who was a very cooperative, endearing guy. A lot of people, when you approach them to talk about themselves or their relative, if you're polite and respectful, they're quite eager to accommodate because they've never gotten attention before with the published words, so that they actually appreciate it. And they'll ask for extra copies. I'd like to give this to my aunt or to my sister, or, and I'm so grateful for their participation. I accommodate. Uh-oh. Oh. So that's a wonderful picture of Jimmy K. And what's amazing about him is not only was a major political figure, he was one of the great comic carvers of all time. And he generally sold them to, anybody here know Bill Dutton's Rare Things? That's before my time. But Bill Dutton bought most of Jimmy K's casino. And he would come to Santa Fe and sell them dolls. And for example, those large sheep casino were said to be up on a shelf at Bill Dutton's Rare Things, not for sale. They were the mascots. And Jimmy only sold to Bill Dutton. And here's an owl casino chasing a couple of defiant Sioux clowns. Here's a cute little mama with a baby. And those sheep or something, I've owned them twice and sold them twice. And sometimes you do stupid things. Maybe. Now, he was one of the great comic carvers of all time. He sometimes carved erotic carvings, gay erotic carvings. Now, he was married and had 5 children. I said to a woman that worked with him, Joan Caballero, for years, that is Bill Dutton, I said, what's with the gay carvings by Jimmy K? She said, well, Bill Dutton was an openly gay man, and he requested that Jimmy K sometimes do gay erotic carvings. Now, one example, this is a gay erotic carving. What is it? It's a pile of Koryumsi mudheads goofing around. What makes it erotic? Well, if you look at it carefully, the mouths of some of the mudheads are on the crotches of some of the other mudheads. So Bill Dutton found that hilarious and would snap it up and buy it. Hey, Jimmy made what the boss wanted in terms of that, and that's another example of a comic cover. What's comic about it? Well, clowns are supposed to be funny. That's a grumpy clown. There's a clown who has the world on his shoulders, whereas the other 2 are hilarious. And this is one of my favorite Jimmy K carvings ever. He took a piece of wood that anyone else would have thrown out. And what do we have down here? We have a skunk. And here's the skunk. And what are these clowns doing? There's 7 or 8 clowns trying to get the hell away from the skunk. Only Jimmy would have thought of that. And he really was. He was a comic genius. Now I'm going to talk about the Hanyudi family. We're going to move beyond these rather traditional forms of Hopi Katsinam, and we're going to talk about moving from early action figures into multiple new forms of Katsina carving. And I'm going to start with the Hanyudi family because they're probably more influential across 3 generations than any other Katsina carving family, but that's the big. Clyde, the grandfather. Clyde was just featured in Lavasta Hanyudi's book, which was part of a show at the museum in Santa Fe for the past 3 months at the
wheelwright.
at the wheelwright. And Clyde was the one that was kidnapped among others, but he was taken to Keams Canyon rather than to California. Anyway, Clyde, as he's heroically described in Lavasta's book, eventually found his way back to the Hopi reservation and became a traditional Hopi, retrieved the language, became a traditional Hopi in the cornfields and growing other vegetation and ceremonially involved. The second generation, Brian, Ronald, and Lauren, and the third generation, Mavasta, who wrote that book, and his brother, Kevin. So here's one from Clyde, the grandfather, and you can see we're in a whole new generation of Katsina carving. Look at all the accoutrements. Look at all the motion. This is a Nataska, or a black ogre, and there's added clothing. He's got a cane or a crook. There's fur around his neck. There's a very detailed sash and even tassels on his boots. That is also in my 2019 book, and it's in the Museum of Arizona, as these two are. These are by Brian, the oldest son, in the second generation. And look at the garments, look at the details. This is just a whole different level of expression, a movement towards not quite the full ultra-realism movement yet, but it certainly is a very impressive level of detail. That is a male and a female butterfly man and butterfly maiden. Politaka polimana. This is by Ronald. I have a small carving by Ronald down in my booth. What did he do? He did a level of detail that we took it even further. Individual veins on feathers, individual strands of hair, and he often used not paint so much as stains and incredibly precise sanding, and that's a coal katsina on the right, and a konina or havasupai on the left. This is by Lauren. Look at the detail on that. Look at the bells on the knees, the terraced flaps on the boot, the veins on the feathers, the necklace. Lauren Hanyuti, sorry. And we're going to switch temporarily to another, arguably perhaps the greatest contributor to the ultra-realistic category as an individual, Cecil Kalmentua. This doll is 5 feet 7 inches tall. I took some work. Look at the work on the eagle feather. That's from my book, 2019, and it is at the Heard Museum. The photos by Megan Richmond. Back in '95, when ultra-realism in Katsina was really hot, there was a book that Theda Bassman published just on Cecil, only him. And that's quite an example there, that eagle Katsina. Look at the detail and the motion, the body configuration. Now, I can't talk about other people in the ultra-realistic and sculptural styles because of time limitations, but here are some of the major names that deserve recognition. And I do have a carving in my booth by Neil David Sr., but he's so creative. The one in my booth is done in a traditional style, not ultra-realism, because he works in different styles. Not many carvers do both traditional style, which I'll define shortly, and the ultra-realistic style. You may have your own favorites. I actually do have my own favorites as to the various styles, which I won't share here. Now, along came Manfred Sissonkowa, an old friend of mine. And he's in his 80s. He's Bearstrap clan from Shimoklavi. He originated the traditional style Katsina movement. He told me multiple times when I first talked to him in the early 90s, he said back in the 70s, he decided to make a protest in his carvings. He thought the ultra-realistic carvings were becoming too pretty. He said, when I go into the kiva as a child at night, dark and smoky with coal smoke, nothing was pretty, it was scary. He said, I want to get back to how they really look. And he said it was a vision, and that the real spirit of the Katsina carvings was being forgotten. And there's a picture from a few years ago at the herd show in March. He's holding a cow Katsina. And I already said this part. Sometimes I repeat myself. Have you noted that? So here's a Manfred doll that's been in my possession, not for sale, since the early 90s. It's a Masao Katsina, the god of the underworld and death, but also the figure who greeted the Hopi when they entered the fourth world and taught them how to grow corn and taught them how to use fire. And one thing that some of you know that my other profession is I'm a suicidologist. And what fascinated me about this Masao character was he taught them how to grow corn, how to use fire, welcomed them into the fourth world, all life-sustaining things. But he's also the god of death. That's not Anglo-linear thinking, is it? It's comprehensive, it's dialectical, it's, to me, fascinating. Anyway, there's Masao. Masao's scary, right? He's the death spirit. Look at his eyes. I mean, that's scary. A couple of years ago, I went to the Carnegie Museum in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, excuse me. And I took a picture of this Omao Katsina from 1900, 1910. And Manfred liked my picture on Facebook, so this was an interpretation. And it's a pretty damn beautiful interpretation. That's an Omao Katsina. Those are clouds on the head. Here, a Hemis and a Ziohemis, large, by Manfred. 3 more by Manfred, including that cow actually is in my booth. You get the point. This guy established a tradition, and it persists to this day. There are generations of traditional style carvers now. There are scores of them, and it all came from Manfred. He's deserved a lot of recognition. He has his Katsina in the permanent collection of these major museums here. And he was designated an Arizona Living Treasure way back in 2022, which was, at that point, about 30 years after he created the traditional style trend. There are many people who have become important in the traditional style Katsina world, and one of them, particularly prominently, was Walter Houghton. And this one is by him. I have an article along with Anna's photographs and my friend Ruff Hoover in the most recent Native American Art magazine on distressed dolls. And Walter invented the distressed dolls as he decided to make them look old and distress them. How did he do it? He actually did it by putting on regular paint. And according to him, he would then brush it over and over again with water, producing this aged form. Did he totally tell people how he distressed it? No, because Katsina carvers. They keep secrets. Artists don't give away their best information to other people, right? So Walter, down in my booth, our booth, is also a very large Walter doll done in a relatively fine art style, but Walter turned over, changed to the far simpler distress style. That's what he became known for, and he essentially invented it, which is described in that article in the new magazine. So here, many of these people are my friends, or at least acquaintances. I've communicated with everybody on this list over the years, and William Kotzke, any of you know Joseph and Janice Day here? Yeah, well, William was Janice's father and a fine carver in his own right. And Manuel de Echevarria he painted this hat. And none of you have one of these. And it's not for sale. All right, I'm going to finish by talking about Vavasta. Oh, by the way, I forgot to hold up the Manford cow. Oh, yeah. So Mavasta Hanyudi is the third generation of the Hanyudi family, and he was born in '79. He's Coyote clan. He's a fascinating guy. He's one of my favorite artists in the world. He's a middle school teacher and is very dedicated to teaching his Hopi students. And he often starts the year off with the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, that famous, essentially the ridding of Pueblo lands of the Catholic missionaries and the taking back control over their lands. And any of you ever hear about the Pueblo Revolt in your high school experience? Not too many. It's a rather specific native topic, but his students love him because he gives them a Hopi relevant exposure to history. So he's a part-time carver, but he's a genius, and there he is. And he's won many awards at the major events at SWAYA, at Herd. He's just remarkably talented, as I'll show you here. So this is now there's ultra realism, but then there's this. This is three angles of the same carving. Look at the different motifs. This is a triptych right here. Look at over here. All these miniature things, they're baskets, they're corn. There's a bunch of coyipses up there. And here we have bean casino. Those are called Laguna gamblers. And we've got dragonflies. That's an immensely complex thing to carve and paint. But check this out. This is a kiva, an underground ceremonial chamber. And he's created a kiva with a polypmana, looks like, coming out of it. But he decided, I'll carve the inside too. You think that's easy to do? Here's the inside mudheads. They're sitting on a bench, drumming, singing, doing the ceremony, inside and out. I've never seen anybody else do that before. Abbey Road, but instead of the Beatles, it's a Kuyamsi, Ahoy, the Kwikyo Yaka, and another Ahoy. One of the things he excels at doing is taking pop culture among Bahanas and infusing it with Hopi motifs, and his students love it because they're exposed to both. And here he sort of brings them together. As with this, here's good old Boba Fett. But that skateboard deck, it doesn't say Star Wars, it says Sohu Wars, because Sohu is the Hopi word for star. And Boba Fett, look at that. He's holding a Hopi rabbit stick. And he's got arrow marks on his, whatever these things, gauntlets, I guess. Speaking of skateboard decks, I just got this from him recently. You probably think that's Kermit the Frog. It's really not. It's Kermit the Pakwa. Because Pakwa is the Hopi word for frog. And look at me. He made this. It's a used skateboard deck. And I was happy when he offered it to me. I've got more to say about him, though. I've already described this as an important volume. It is made up of, wait a minute, no pictures. It's made up of bas-relief carvings on wood depicting his grandfather's capture, his grandfather's survival in the school, his grandfather coming back to Hopi, and how Mavasta used to go out into the fields. And grandfather was indefatigable and would weed and plant all day long and Mavasta would try to keep up, but would largely fall asleep. And anyway, it's such a tender, loving tribute to his grandfather. Here's a quote from him. Like many Native American children across the country in the late 19th century, he was forced to leave his reservation and go to a residential boarding school. There the government cut his hair, punished him for speaking his native language, and gave him a new name, Clyde. But Mavasta's grandfather came back and became a traditional Hopi. So, my conclusion is the Hopi tradition of spirit beings in woods is alive and well. The trajectory is always changing, and it's fascinating to watch and to be exposed to. And I have endeavored in this presentation to be accurate and respectful of the Hopi people and make sure that people hear that I am a specialist, but I'm not an expert. And here are references from the presentation. So I don't know if anybody has questions, comments, or heckling that you'd like. Pretty good turnout for Barry Walsh. What the heck?
Do you see women starting to carve?
That's in my second book. There are women carvers, and the one who started it in the 30s started it because her husband went blind at a young age. He couldn't tend the fields, and she decided to start carving, and she did. And I interviewed her daughter and her granddaughters. Anna was there taking pictures of them, and she started that. But now this is the bolos we're wearing today. These are carved by a woman. It looks like it's a basket, but it's not. It's actually cottonwood. And what's her name again, Anna?
Sandra Suhu.
Yeah, Sandy Suhu. I'll talk about her tomorrow. And but she basically said one line from her about women. You know, these men complain about women carvers. When they start paying my bills and feeding my children, I'll stop carving. There's a whole story in the second book about women carvers. Actually, there's a lot of them who have, but my second talk is about all these Hopi rules and expectations that over time have been modified within that culture, and they're fascinating. I don't endorse or condemn any of them. I just report it and hear what Hopi have to say about it. Thank you for the question. Anybody else?
How did a lot of older casinos survive if they were given as toys to children?
Well, the ones that were given as toys and kept in the home and hung on the walls and played with, they tend to be pretty roughed up. Many of them disappeared. But the reality is, collections started in the 20s, and they've been collected by many people, and in many cases, they've been collected in museums and very well cared for. But a lot of the old dolls, people will say, well, my great-grandfather collected this, or this my grandmother had, and people can tell their spirit being sold if they have them. A lot of people will treat them with respect, so they don't end up grievously damaged or worn. But you take a look at this from the 1880s. Not much paint left, but to me, it still has an eerie spirituality to it. I look at it, I consider it an honor to be hanging out with it.
Other than the Hopi group of Christians, do you find that there are other tribes that have analogous types of tradition of carvings like this?
Well, the reality is I concentrated on Hopi exclusively because I have another line of work. And it's hard to become truly versed in something as complex as this. So the Zuni, for example, have a long tradition of making Katsina figures, much less frequent than Hopi. The Akama are known to make certain common flat dolls. I don't know anything about them, because I've only studied and gone to the Hopi Reservation. But there's more stuff out there. Some of the New Mexican pueblos are much more prohibitive about making casino carvers and selling them to outsiders. But I can't say anything knowledgeable about it, because I'm a one-trick pony. Time to go?
Is this little guy a badger?
No,
Okay.
it's a chipmunk.
Okay.
That's a nice, sweet little chipmunk, not a mean badger. I guess we're supposed to stop now. Thank you for coming.
Where did you get this? The registration desk? Thank you.